Hey y'all, just wanted to share a couple thoughts that I had right now. I was thinking about my dance improv class because I did a little like footwork warm-up video that we used to do in class. I did this like a few minutes ago, so I'm a little sweaty and it's hot here. But that class was all about improv and moving in ways that are not particularly similar to the way that you're used to moving, and finding ways to look at the way that somebody else is moving and, copy it. Copy it in a way that is true to how you're used to moving in your body, seeing how it looks on theirs, trying it out for yourself, and then adjusting it based on what you need, based on your style. And of course, you might find that your style can grow, can expand, because you have seen it reflected in another person. And so being able to kind of oscillate between this performance or like adaptation as a way of getting to know yourself, while also seeing it as a form of community in a way, is very interesting. And I think I wanted to relate it to this sort of dilemma of individual responsibility versus systemic injustices, and like the responsibility that lies within this entity, this amorphous entity, or lies within the people who do hold power. And of course you want to see yourself as part of something bigger, and you want to believe that the actions that you take are meaningful and impactful, and they certainly are. I think that as an individual, I do have ownership over my actions. I have agency. I can choose what I want to consume, what I don't consume, who I choose to listen to, what things I choose to unlearn or learn. And at the same time, it can be really hard to parse out which desires are truly mine versus what desires have been imposed on me by other people, by society, And I've really been, toying with this of like, I want, there's no like perfectly ethical consumption under capitalism, right? But I feel like people use that as a scapegoat, or use that as a justification for extreme consumerism. And sometimes I feel like, I'm buying this shirt. I already have 5 other shirts. Why do I need to buy another shirt? And on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, Carla, like you should not be buying another shirt. You already have another shirt. And on the other hand, I'm also like, I want another shirt. I want to feel, I want to appreciate the material things in the world in a way that reflects my individuality. Like the things that I choose out, I'm not just going on shopping sprees and having these huge hauls from fast fashion companies. I don't do that. I like shop secondhand as best as I can, and if I go to the mall with like a friend and I see something that I really like, I'm gonna buy it because I've worked hard for my own money. I've like earned it or whatever. And so it's kind of hard to wrap my head around that sometimes, and like, I try to practice these things, or I have these theories, I have these ways of living and of seeing the world. I'm recently like vegetarian, and that's also been something that I've kind of been not necessarily struggling with, but really reflecting on. I've had a couple days where I've consumed some meat product, and it's, I feel a certain level of guilt, and then there's like the devil on my shoulder that is saying, well, it's all screwed up anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? And I tend to fall in this kind of moral perfectionism, which I think is particularly hard under systems of oppression, or is especially like salient under systems of oppression, and this kind of like moral saint attitude, I feel as though has been thrust upon women in a way that like we have been conditioned to overextend ourselves for the sake of others. And in my case, it shows up as trying to maybe compensate for, I don't know, my existence as a person through morality. And it's really hard. And sometimes I want to be like, yes, I know this is the moral thing to do, and these are my values and these are my beliefs, and I, have read these things, and I'm intellectually capable of making my own judgments about the world, and I think that's absolutely true. And on the other hand, I'm like, well, I think that I deserve less, or I think that I'm not worthy of having stability, of having a nice home. Like, that's literally all, like having nice things. Like, I feel like I'm not worthy of having nice things, or having a stable life that is not overrun by chaos, because I'm like, well, no, I can't be feeding into capitalism. I can't be feeding into this other thing, And it's really unfortunate that many of us have come to believe that it is the full responsibility of the individual to change the entire world. I certainly cannot do that. But I do deserve, and I am worthy of having nice things. At least I would like to believe so. And by nice things, I don't mean like, $1,000, like, I don't know, like TV or some, crazy car or whatever. But I do think that I deserve to live in a nice home. I think we all deserve to have a shelter over our heads. And like me going and buying groceries and like maybe splurging a little bit on, I don't know, like a nice dinner, buying the ingredients for a nice dinner, and the groceries can be expensive. But I feel like that's not, it is, and at the same time it is not such a big deal as I'm making it out to be. And you're like, okay, how does this connect to your dance improv? Well, I think that I've been trying to be, and this is something that I've kind of been working on since I started therapy, but being able to live in a dialectical manner and being able to try on new things and adjusting them to the person that I am. And yeah, because I think that, at least for me, a lot of my life I've molded myself to fit the expectations of the world instead of trying to have the world accommodate me, or tweaking certain things out in the world so that they align more with who I am. And of course, there are going to be exceptions to this. I think there are certain things that shouldn't be permissible, but there's nuance. I feel like that's the most important thing that I've been kind of losing within myself, and I'm such a big person of like, I'm such a person who's big on nuance. is what I'm trying to get across. And I've kind of lost that. And again, in my improv class, this is dance, but we had some workshops with a theater professor, and obviously in improv it's all about the yes and I think that having these contradictions physically, mentally, morally, emotionally, spiritually, that is all part of the human condition, and trying to be so clean cut and pristine with everything that we do is tiring. It's absolutely tiring. And I think that's also another reason for the name of my channel, because this indecision really comes from this fear or this need of everything being tidy, of things fitting in boxes. And that's not how things need to be. Maybe that's the way that we've been taught, that I've been taught that things need to be, but that's not necessarily true. And it's really hard to come to this conclusion of like, I can try to do everything that I can, as best that I can. And it's not going to change the entire world. Of course, that doesn't, resolve my responsibility by saying that like, oh, the systems are in place and, it's not my fault. Absolutely not. Again, like I said, I have agency over what I choose to do with the circumstances that I've been given, and that's different for everybody. But yeah, I feel like this is something that I've talked about before, of being aware of the limitations, but also, taking advantage of the privilege that you do have. I'm just thinking about how today I'm currently visiting someone, and I was making breakfast, and we're in an Airbnb, and they bought groceries. And I'm not exactly sure if this necessarily ties with like capitalism, but I think it does tie with a sense of worth, maybe a lower self-worth, because we have berries, and like also I think this ties in with a scarcity mindset, which, there we go, that's the connection to capitalism. And like I said in my last video, I think capitalism traumatizes people in ways that we do not yet understand, and I need to read more about. But I was making breakfast, and there's a yogurt, and there were berries and eggs and things like that, and I was so terrified of using what is here. I was so terrified of, like I'm scared of wasting stuff. I'm scared, and like honestly, I'm a person who keeps a lot of like my physical things, as I said in like 2 videos ago, because I never know when I might need it. I live in I try to live in a very sustainable way as much as I can, and I've got it, I've learned this from my mom. I've gathered this information from my mom because she lives in very sustainable ways, and I think in part because she grew up in scarcity. She grew up with a really big family, and their needs were not met. She grew up in a different country, but there wasn't always enough food for everybody, and so you have to like hold on to everything because it gives you a sense of security. And I think that kind of has impacted me in a slightly different way, because obviously she was able to give me, not obviously, but thankfully she was able to give me a better life than the one she had. It was definitely a rough upbringing nonetheless. I grew up with a single mom, and yeah, there are certain struggles that we went through as mother-daughter, and that I went through individually. And okay, you're like, okay, where does this tie in? I think that I have been afraid of wanting more for myself. And in a weird way, I think it might be because I'm so used to being okay with what I already have. Because I see ambition as destructive. And the way that I see ambition is not, again, it's not necessarily tied to material gain, but more so, I want to be ambitious in the way that I want to gain knowledge. I want to be ambitious in the way that I want to pursue justice. I want to be ambitious in the way that I want my ambition to drive human interaction with other people. But in my brain, it's really hard to think about ambition or think about wanting more in a way that's not associated with material things, because we have been so conditioned to, at least I have, like, I see ambition as this almost negative thing, as this scary thing, as this thing of like power. And I think I think ambition can become destructive. But I remember, I think about and I remember this thing that my philosophy professor brought up in lecture. And he was saying that, I was choosing to be in the class that he was teaching, Ethics in a Human Life. It's an elective course. He was saying that, hopefully the people that were in that room are already morally sensible to the injustices in the world, that are already thinking about the way that so many different things interact, so many systems of oppression coalesce. And for whatever reason, I've doubted those capabilities. I've doubted my capability of, being intelligent. I've doubted my capability of thinking critically. I've doubted my capability of making art, of bringing joy. I've doubted all of these capabilities. And it has gotten so in my core that I feel afraid of using the food that's in the frickin' fridge. Are you kidding me? Because I'm like, well, I don't want this person to have to go and buy more yogurt, it's expensive. I don't want to, use up too many berries. Girl, this is crazy. I'm I feel like I don't deserve to have these. It's not even good. It's not even some luxury. You deserve to have food. Everybody deserves to have food. And oh my God, okay, don't even get me started on, I live in the US. Don't even get me started on this freaking government. And just the state of affairs worldwide. But, everybody deserves to have a roof over their head, food, water, all these things. And it's so hard because I have that thought in the back of my mind of there are other people who don't have this. Why am I worthy of this? And it's not necessarily that I'm more deserving, you know what I mean? No, obviously not. It's just this is pure luck. Absolutely pure luck that I was born under specific circumstances, that I have certain privileges. And yet, I feel this guilt. Again, to the point where I feel guilty indulging in eating nutritious food for myself. And it's so bizarre It's so freaking bizarre. Yeah. I have a couple of days off before I start work again this summer, and I'm like, I have so many things I need to do. I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Why am I, just sitting on the couch? Oh my God. It's just crazy. And I just need to remember that there will be contradictions. I need to embrace those contradictions. If anything, I want to be the most contradictory person ever. How contradictory can I get? Yes, I want to work hard, but also, yes, I'm going to lay on the couch. Yes, I'm going to take a break. Absolutely. These are forms of resistance. And I think also wanting more for yourself is a form of resistance that I'm still processing with, and I'm still grappling with, trying to figure out what the dimensions of those are, what the limitations, what the restrictions are on that, the exceptions to this rule, because there always will be exceptions, I think. There's always nuance, what is this going to look like for me? How do I make sure that it does not get destructive for myself and for others, as capitalism has wired it to be, I think, because, we're always going after the next thing and the next luxury good or the next high-paying job or the next, status symbol. And I don't want my ambition to be like that. I don't want my self-worth to look like that. I want my self-worth to allow me to allow me to feel neutral about eating what I eat, about wearing what I wear. Feel neutral about, the things that I consume. And again, not everything is neutral, and I cannot, begin to explain in full detail my entire life circumstances and the way that I think through things, but I hope that this is going to the right audience that is kind of on the same wavelength as me. And if not, oh well, I'll just have to get better at expressing my own thoughts. But it's just so strange that I think that I'm somehow overindulging, or I'm, committing some sort of moral infraction, contributing to injustice, when I choose to slow down, when I choose to freaking buy, I don't know, a more expensive or better brand of yogurt, or buy fresh berries. Why am I feeling like that? Why does it feel wrong to want to nurture and take care of my body? Why? I'm not exactly sure. So, yeah, it's just a lot of practicing. It's just going to require practice, and that's really what life is, of being able to live dialectically and being able to, learn from others and learn from yourself, and adjust your ways of living and, in order to accommodate your needs, while also being critical and disrupting systems of power that keep people oppressed. And it's so hard. And I think it's especially hard on social media, at least with short form content, because there's always so much you could be doing. Always. But yeah, I'm gonna keep this here because it's almost 25 minutes. Oh my God. And I think there are certainly things that I jumbled through. So sorry about that. But I guess I just wanted to dump these thoughts out somewhere. And, you know, part of this channel is, in part, the purpose of this channel is to serve as a digital diary of sorts. And so there are bound to be contradictions as I evolve. And I have to be okay with that. And yeah. Well, I have work that I need to get done. I'm gonna try to not overthink everything that I just said in this video. And I'm gonna go feed myself lunch because, as much as I might not believe it, my body deserves to be fueled by nutritious food. That's just the way that it is. So make sure you're drinking water, make sure you're eating good food, make sure you're getting sleep, getting rest, and doing something that fuels your creativity, or that gives your brain a rest, like shuts it off from all the noise, all the chaos, you know, watch some reality TV or something. And I hope that you're able to feel comfort in existing within the dialectic and nuance, because I think we need more of that, of being okay, of living with the nuance, of being okay not having clear-cut answers, because we live in a very non-ideal, very complex world. And that balance between individual responsibility and accountability of these systems, it's hard. It's hard to balance out. But we can only get better with practice. We can only get better by observing others and trying things out for ourselves. And if it doesn't work, we leave it. If it doesn't align with our circumstances, then we leave it. So, yeah, that's all I'm covering today. I hope you enjoyed. Wishing you a lot of love, a lot of peace, and a lot of good energy. Bye. Oh, also, these are my nails that I did. Sorry. These are the nails from the last video. Yeah. Okay.